On tonight's episode of the Unselects, we look to answer the following questions. Did the town knowingly withhold information from the residents regarding its new updated MBTA plan?
And is being a town official, elected or appointed, a requirement to participate in your town government? I'm Brian Costello.
And I'm Greg Richards, and we are the Unselects. All right. So starting off tonight, Brian, I think it's important for us to go back and give some credit where credit is due. In the prior planning board meeting, I think not this month, but the prior month, I really want to highlight Mo Apollo, because one thing Mo said, which we're going to go to, he really indicated how important it was for the residents to be heard. So let's take a look at that clip right now, okay?
This is not a Roman Colosseum where it's thumbs up and thumbs down.
Mr. Dunue, I'm going to tell you this, okay? I hear what you're saying, and I know the limits of what our authority is, okay? When I get on this board, I'd say I'm going to let the public, when I'm having a hearing, that the public's going to be able to voice their concerns, okay? And that's what I'm doing. And you can take it or not, but I'm sorry, you're not going to tell me how to run a meeting.
So what's your thought about that, Brian?
I thought it was a welcome exchange to see Mo Apollo step up for the residents and to speak for the people. That was a packed room. We were all there. And to speak for us rather than just kowtow to a developer who was trying to close the meeting pretty much.
Right, and it's not even just a developer, it's an attorney. I know, as an attorney, and you're not practicing, but yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed the fact that he did articulate that one of the things that he committed to was allowing the citizens' voices to be heard. And I think that is one of the core foundation principles of, I say, the Unselects, and why we did this, because we felt as though that just wasn't happening, right?
Yeah.
So if you compare and contrast this with the next clip we're going to go to, and the reason I think this is important is this is a clip of Kevin Mizikar, our town manager, on the Ask the Manager show, when he kind of talks a little bit about some frustrations he's having, I guess, with some dialogue that's going around town. So let's take a look at that.
I would love when someone learns about something and doesn't understand it, that they reach out to our office and say, hey, I wasn't aware of this. Can you get me to a website that may have some background information, rather than, set up some, I'll call it secondary dialogue in the community to refute what the town is doing. And I'm trying not to go on a tangent, but that really frustrates me. I'm willing to engage with anyone who wants to have a conversation about why we're doing, what decisions I've made, what decisions staff have made, how we're thinking about these things. But when you set up a parallel dialogue in the community and just want to fight the town and don't even really take the opportunity to learn and understand why we're doing something, that's really frustrating to me.
So who do you think he's talking about?
Gee, I don't know. The thing that strikes me most about that conversation is that idea of a parallel dialogue, right? It's incumbent upon a citizen to have a dialogue and be a part of civics, to be a part of their town. And to have a dialogue when Mr. Mizikar is not in the room is not parallel. It's actually being engaged in your community.
Right. And the way I kind of took it as well is that he was looking for engagement in order to explain or try to, let's say, coerce, but convince, let's say, us or any other resident that their way of thinking or their thought process is the only thought process, right? The reason I think that, I haven't gone, or let's say we haven't gone, had a conversation is because he's articulated, say, MBTA, that he believes compliance is the correct path for Shrewsbury, right? If we don't agree with that, or if I say I don't believe that we should follow state mandates that we don't believe in, or we think that we should at least dialogue around that and say we should have some pushback, that's part of the democracy, right? That's it. We can have differences of opinion. We don't always have to disagree, right? We can disagree. But I don't think his role should be, hey, I'm going to try to convince you that I'm right. I think he should stick to his point and articulate, here's why I think this is the right way to go, but I appreciate and can respect your opinion.
Yeah, and I think he tends to, every government official or bureaucrat, a lot of times they're thinking about the minutia of details around a particular law or a particular guideline, and they're not necessarily thinking long term, how does this impact the people? And to say that, sort of trust us, we're from the government,
Right.
The idea really should be, there are a lot of folks that do a lot of independent research on their free time, who aren't paid by the town, and come with facts
Right.
and opinions, and we should all be heard.
Right. And the perfect example is the MBTA, right? MBTA Communities Act. Because what I want to show here is some other terms that have been used by our town officials regarding that, along the same lines around if you have a dissenting opinion or a difference of opinion, how it's perceived. So we're going to go back to the May Select Board meeting when Beth Cassavan is talking to Kevin Mizikar here about the reason why they moved the vote on MBTA to the fall.
As the executive body for the town, we put our trust in town staff to put us in the best possible position on important matters such as this. While I have no doubt that town staff and the consultant have developed a bylaw that reflects community feedback and will be found largely in compliance, not taking advantage of the pre-adoption process to gain feedback from the state is distracting and has allowed skepticism and misinformation to crowd out facts and data.
There's a key word there, a couple key words, right? Misinformation. And this has been used a few times. You hear it, on the federal level, you probably turn on the news and you hear misinformation all the time. And the problem I really have with it is they never take the step to articulate what specifically is misinformation. So in this particular case, okay, there's a group who is talking about MBTA communities and why the existing plan might not work, right? And facts, like you mentioned earlier, research, people spent time doing this. That's perceived, or I believe she's articulating that as misinformation, when in reality, it's information that we're trying to provide. So to always use those terms, I think they need to be careful, because as we go through this in a few more clips, we're going to kind of see where we're actually at today as a town, as part of this process, and truly maybe what is that misinformation, what is the disinformation really around this act?
Yeah, I think it's disingenuous for an elected official to throw out that term so kind of glibly, because to your point, people came to those meetings with an incredible amount of information. Not misinformation, not disinformation, just information that they got through some really good research. It's not misinformation that the town didn't do a pre-adoption review. That was brought up by the people.
Right.
It's not misinformation that the plan probably wouldn't pass muster. That's not misinformation. It's information, right? And I think to have that dialogue, we have to be careful, but we also have to hold our elected officials and our appointed officials accountable when they use terms like that, which kind of turn people off, I think.
Yeah, and one other piece that she had mentioned right along those lines is at the beginning, she says, as the executive branch of the government, we trust in town staff, right? We should trust in town staff, but we should also verify. They are an oversight board, right? If they're not providing that oversight or digging into what the town staff is doing, that's really not performing the role. They're not there simply, to rubber stamp or just sign off on things they have to. They should be digging into, asking questions and the like, correct?
Yeah. People aren't pests, right?
Right.
We're here to participate in our government. And so having that dialogue is vital. And to say, again, go back to, we trust in what the bureaucrats have said. Again, they might be right, but let's really take a look at what the people are saying. How do these decisions impact the people, and why are they filling rooms if it was something that wasn't that important?
Exactly. Now, along the lines of this timeline, I'm going to still go back to this meeting. It's important to note, this was May 2nd, okay? I'm going to show a really quick clip here about Beth when he talks about the pre-adoption process, and let's note specifically what she says to town manager Kevin Mizikar during this clip.
And then, Mr. Mizikar, we would ask that you coordinate with town staff to make sure that the pre-adoption packet gets sent to the state
Absolutely.
quickly. Thank you.
Okay, she mentions there, coordinate with town staff to ensure the pre-adoption packet is submitted. And then she says quickly. That was on May 2nd. during the select board meeting on the 11th, right, Christopher McGoldrick, the Director of Planning and Economic Development, stated that they did not submit the pre-adoption packet to June 5th. And there was a reason behind why that wasn't submitted, which we'll get to. So in your career, if your boss asks you to do a task quickly, how long would you say it should take you to get back to your boss?
Probably not that timeline, right? I think where it's such an important issue to the town, especially where you had town meeting coming up, you had a lot going on. I think it was important that if my boss, which more or less at this particular instance, the select board is my boss, tells me to do something, I would expect it to have gotten done really quickly.
I would agree. I think in that time period, 4 weeks, I can't really look at anything my boss has ever asked me and said, hey, I need you to get on this, get it done quickly, where I would come back and say, is 4 weeks from now okay?
Yeah. How about a month?
How about
Is
a
that
month?
good for you?
Right. And like you said, it was very critical. There was a lot of eyeballs. I mean, that was a special, they don't often delay articles of town meeting or request that we vote down certain articles. The town meeting members vote them down. So I would agree. I think this was very important. And the reason why I'm harping on this is because I think it's really important to know where we're actually at. And we did actually get feedback. Part of this, if just take a step back on MBTA. If you remember, as part of our zone, there was a mandatory mixed-use district that had to have the state review it and approve it before we could move forward. On the 11th, we're going to show the clip from Mr. McGoldrick, where he actually lets the select board know the feedback from the state, being the EOHLC, on the mixed-use district. So let's take a look at that.
We did receive feedback from the state on our application for the mandatory mixed-use district. That initial feedback was received, and the state determined that the district does not meet the two-part test that's identified in Section 5C of the guidelines. More specifically, although the proposed district is an eligible location, it does not, in the state's opinion, have existing village style or downtown development, which is essential to preserve pedestrian access to amenities. Although planning staff reserves some opinion with regards to this determination, a revised proposal without a mandatory mixed-use option has been evaluated due to changes in anticipated housing projects. Staff sees this revised proposal as a preferred alternative to the original proposal.
So it was denied.
Yep.
And the other piece I really want to take objection to is at the end. He mentions that staff thinks this plan is a preferred alternative to the original. I have to question that. The only reason that this plan was changed, or he's coming up with a preferred or a different plan, is because the original plan is denied and would not pass, period. End of story. If that plan was really preferred and they had 5-8 months to do it, why wasn't that the plan that was brought to town meeting?
Yeah, exactly. It's when you think about the process here, I remember sitting in those meetings and Mr. McGoldrick bringing up when we asked, what's the process? There was a magic Excel sheet that was going to solve all our problems, and he insisted that this Excel sheet, this magical Excel sheet, was going to actually be approved with no problem.
Right.
And the reality is, we knew, looking at other towns, again, because people have put a lot of work into this, that towns that put similar types of requirements were denied.
Right.
Right?
And we've looked at, in prior episode, the mandatory mixed use document from the state on the requirements of what was required. We've gone through it. I read it. I looked at it. So the interesting part too is, though, there was somebody who actually mentioned, right? I think actually stated at a meeting one time that this plan would be denied. So let's go back and take a look at who that was.
Sure.
The state has not approved any, except for the 3 towns, any of the pre-submitted plans. So these are plans that people paid consultants for. They went to the state. They even worked with the state. And the state said, no, these aren't compliant. I will say that I'm not a betting man, but I will be back here when this is not approved by the state, because it's not going to be approved by the EOHLC, and I'll explain why.
Well, it's too bad you're not a betting man because you could have made some money. I think you could have cleaned up that night. So I think it's just a very good illustration, right? When we've talked about if, as residents, becoming involved with a specific topic, whatever that might be, articulating concerns, doing our own research, presenting that to a board, right? And essentially being what I felt is like dismissed, being called, spreaders of misinformation, providing distraction. And in reality, we were right. You were right.
Yeah, and I think I can barely say EOHLC, right? But what I know is that I did the research, right? And looking at what they proposed, I just knew, and you knew, that this was not going to be approved. I think the dismissiveness, what you didn't see was the faces on the folks on the board, a little bit dismissive, right? And the point is, we're not here to just rabble-rouse. Yeah. We have valid points. You should kind of take them into account. The professionals are not always right.
Correct. Because they're looking at the same data that we're looking at, right? There's a vast amount of information on this that was published by the state and by a whole bunch of other, nonprofits or, say, government entities that are paid millions of dollars to spend their entire lives looking at this. So it is a lot of work to do it, but that's the expectation on these critical matters, that the town staffs would do that. The thing I want to take a look at, we are going to pull up the email here. So this email I actually got this email through a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act, from the town. They do provide it to me. That is where this came from. There's two key parts I want to look at that I think are very important. The number one, just the reiteration of that the area along Route 9 and Route 20, which is a Christmas tree shop area, which was the mandatory mixed use, was reviewed, and it clearly shows district is not approved for inclusion in 3A compliance efforts. More importantly on this, Brian, is the date of the email. What is the date of the email?
May 20, 2024?
Correct. Do you know what else was on May 20, 2024?
Let me think.
Town meeting. So the first day of town meeting was Monday, May 20th at 7 p.m. This email was received on Monday, May 20th at 4:30, okay? Article 44, which was what this was a part of, was not discussed until Tuesday, May 21st. So I'm going to take us back to town meeting, to Tuesday, May 21st, after this email was received, and we're going to listen to what Kevin Mizikar stated about the mixed use portion of the plan.
Staff has completed a mixed-use district location determination form and is awaiting formal determination on this component. That determination will help staff prepare the proposal for further pre-adoption review.
So the mislead, so there's either one or two things. He states there that they're awaiting formal determination. That is false. When he says that, we had formal determination. We had the email. So it's either one of two things. Number one, either our town manager, Kevin Mizikar, is withholding or lying to town meeting, or he didn't know. Because either A, Christopher McGoldrick did not provide him the email, didn't look at the email. But when something so important as an article that had so much discussion around it, if you have this information, it is beholden, right, to be either checking your email and seeing that, hey, this is really important. We should really let town meeting know, even if it's just, we just got this yesterday, haven't really had a time to digest it, but we're going to have to change the zone. Good thing we delayed this till we talked or asking you to delay it, because our plan is going to have to totally change. Because think about this. They still voted as a town meeting, right? We could have voted yes, and we could have implemented a plan that was not compliant because it was kept being pushed through the process. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think the problem is we have so many people doing so many things, but you could blame it on perhaps really busy town meeting coming up, lot to prepare. But the point is, this is where we do have to rely on the professional level of town official, right? And they should be on top of this because this everybody knew how important this was. There was a lot of people that actually were there specifically to vote on these types of articles, right?
Absolutely.
We need to have that information. There's really no excuse. I don't care if it was I just didn't get around to it or I tried to mislead. I don't know which one it is. Either way, it doesn't look good.
No, it doesn't. And that's why I think it's really important for us to show this. And I'm not trying to browbeat anybody, but I just wanted to make it aware is that that is part of the democratic process where we are trying to hold our elected and appointed leaders, right, accountable, because that's our role in the government. So based on this, the town's developed a new plan. They submitted a new plan for pre-adoption and are essentially putting a 90-day hold on discussions because they want to wait for feedback. So instead of going back to the residents and asking, hey, this has been rejected, what do you think we should do moving forward? We're just going to push this forward and say you can't comment for 90 days. So what I want to do is go and look at when the new plan was proposed to the select board, right, or mentioned, kind of the comments from the select board on their feedback, Beth Cassavant's feedback on what Chris McGoldrick has presented. So let's take a look. Oh, before we do that, I do want to show the existing zone, the new zone. It'll be really quick because people are going to be interested in that. So instead, what you can see here is we removed the actual Christmas tree shop area, the Walnut Street area, and now it's completely aligned with the Shrewsbury Commons and then two new 40Bs, the one on Green Street and the one on South Street. So now those new zone has been moved to encompass those areas, which we will talk about. More specifically, the actual acreage and everything else around it is about the same as it was before. We're not going to go into a lot of detail here because this could change, before the fall. But the one key part I want to show is one of the discussion points has already been about how many net new units could this bring. It's still zoned for 1,500 units. It's over 100 acres of land. And based off of our planning department thinks that the net possible new units built is 924. They mention with or without 40B, but let's just say for cost purposes, which is one of the things we've talked about a lot, whether it's a net new unit or a 40B unit, new residents to town still share cost. Fair?
Yeah.
So based off this information, this is the new plan that the select board, that I prematurely kind of went into the select board talking about. So let's go take a look at this video now.
When I look at this proposal, I jotted down some things that I think are responsive to the feedback that I heard just sitting in the room on various occasions, that it no longer abuts Northborough's zone, that I heard quite a bit about Walnut Street from the Walnut Street neighbors, asking for the preservation of the character of their neighborhood. So by moving this away from Walnut Street, I think you achieve that. It takes advantage of areas where there is likely to be development.
So similarly to what Chris McGoldrick said is, we think this is a preferred plan. The way that they're essentially articulating their feedback on this plan, the way I took it is, we took all this feedback from town, and the reason we made these changes is because of you, the residents. But like I said, if it wasn't rejected, they wouldn't have changed the zone.
Not a piece of it.
So as you being in that Walnut Street area, I mean, how does that make you feel when they're stating, we took the feedback from the residents of Walnut Street and how that might impact their area?
Yeah, I didn't see any contrition to saying we were wrong. First of all, we made a mistake. This was not going to pass. And second, no, they're not doing it because of the residents. They are doing it possibly because of the pushback for people like us that have been doing it. But the plan failed. They would have gone forward with it if it hadn't failed.
Right.
Let's face it. Also, I should bring up, a lot of folks brought up that area as a potential on the zone originally. When we were debating where the zone should go, we said, what about those new developments? And we were told flat out, that's just not going to work. So I think, again, the magic Excel sheet's back, and who knows if it'll work. But the idea that we don't have input into this is really challenging, right? We should have input.
I agree, because of all the feedback and all the meetings, to me, everybody knows people make mistakes, right? And I don't know the resistance to saying, we should have thought a little bit long and hard. We should have taken the feedback more seriously. It was rejected. Let's pull in the town again for some additional feedback. But one thing I do want to touch upon here is the cost of this new plan, because I think it is important to look at. And actually, one thing that was even brought up by John Samia was a look or an ask for a look at the financials again. So let's take a look at that.
So at the second FinCom hearing, the analysis about additional resources that would be required to be appropriated by the town under this, if we could revise that in terms of if this is accepted, what would the impact potentially be on schools, on infrastructure, on public safety, using the same methodology that you did, if we could just revise it?
So I've gone ahead and done that. We've revised the numbers because I think it's important to show. If we remember, this is the sheet they were talking about,
Yeah.
where we had 853 units and their numbers there. The reason I think it's important is the net new units increasing, and I think I've talked about this 5 times, is what the actual cost of a student is. We've talked about that a couple prior Unselects episodes, but I've finally, I think I've narrowed it down to what I think is a fair approach, and I did it on this sheet. So I've gone ahead and updated the sheet. We have 924 units there, and my cost per pupil of 11,500. Now that number was based off of variable costs of our school district, which is used by a lot of consultants that do financial studies for towns, RKG being one, and I'll show a reference here. But when you look at this, if we add 924 units, it's going to cost us $2 million a year, meaning we'll have $2 million more of school, police, and fire expenses than what we're going to gain from tax revenue and excise tax. Shocker.
Yeah, it's not a net gain in the least, not even close.
Right.
And the math here is really undisputable.
Right. And just to show people where this comes from, that I didn't make up the numbers, right? My engineering brain won't allow that. I did actually I used the same methodology. They did this for Lancaster, Massachusetts, around Neshoba Valley Regional School District, okay? They're showing there's the variable cost, and the source is the state, right? Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. I used the same spreadsheet. I looked at Shrewsbury's numbers, right? And that's the number I come up with. I think it's a fair number as a cost per pupil. And like I said, I would welcome the feedback from the school department to say why that isn't a good number to use. I think it's a fair number, right? So in the last minute or so that we have left here in this episode, I think we should go back, right, to a slide we like. And that slide is the checklist from town meeting, right? The think, right?
Yeah.
The only reason I want to touch upon this is it just makes me want to, when we look at why are we pushing some of these plans? Why are we abiding by all these mandates or somebody's idea from the state? If we fell back to these questions, we wouldn't proceed, right?
Yeah, there's no, when you think about it, can we afford it? No, right? Is it in the best interest of everybody? Certainly not. And I go down to does it recognize the importance of the individual and the minority? When you talk about the minority, what it means is those folks most impacted oftentimes aren't the people that have enough voice, right? So you put something in one neighborhood, the idea is people on the other side of town might not care, right? And they sort of bank on that a little bit. And again, that comes back to civic responsibility. If we come to the government as full townspeople, we have more voice.
Absolutely. So that's all the time we have for this episode. I know we'll be back soon with an additional episode of the Unselects. So thank you for watching, and hope to see you on a future episode of the Unselects. Thank you very much.
Thank you.